Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before we begin the majlis, I would like to express, above all and without any comparison, my utter gratitude to the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing me to be with the blessed, beautiful community of Leicester here in Masjid Al-Hussain, these nights of Aza. And at the same time, I would like to thank sincerely the hard-working mu'mineen and mu'minat at the EC, headed by Brother Samir, and thereafter Brother Arif, and all the team, mashallah, for their dedication and their hard work and their service towards the mu'mineen and mu'minat, especially with the difficulty facing everybody regarding the COVID challenges. May Allah tabarak wa ta'ala bless you all. It is an absolute honor and a privilege to be with them. And it's great to see initiatives, great to see ideas, the involvement of English recitation for Ma'tam, and the hard work that the team, you can see them working so well together, including, people who, of course, were previous in the team, like Brother Jibreel and others working outside at the parking and so on. Great spirit. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep you all protected with the barakah of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. وأعوذ به من شر نفسي إن النفس لأمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الخلق وخاتم الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين، سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المطهرين المكرمين. السلام عليك سيدي ومولاي يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم وهو أحسن القائلين وأصدق الصادقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن الناس من يشري نفسه ابتغاء مرضات الله والله رؤوف بالعباد. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the purification of the souls, the enlightenment of the hearts, for the purification of the environment and the atmosphere, raise your voices in honor of the Holy Prophet with the recitation of salawat upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This is an important, significant, detrimental, pivotal event in Islamic history. It's one that has spiritual, theological, economical, and social, as well as historical connotations. And it's an event that signaled the beginning of the Islamic calendar, yet there are a number of misconceptions about it, and many people have misunderstood some part of it. The migration of the Holy Messenger, Rasul al-A'zam Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. From Mecca to Medina is arguably one of the most important events in Islamic history, and one that is marked when it comes to the beginning of the Islamic calendar. For you and I know the significance of the move of the Messenger of God, whereby an entire new Muslim state was established in Medina, whereby Muslims were able to rebuild, were able to consolidate, were able to strengthen themselves. An event, no doubt, of great significance in the seerah, in the biography, and in the blessed life of the greatest and the final of God's messengers. When we look at this particular area, the life of the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, we recognize it is not a biography like any other. For you find today, when you go to libraries, to bookshops, biographies of famous individuals, celebrities, people have come and gone. Today people, for example, study the lives of certain individuals. But you and I know that the life of the Messenger of God is the most important life that you and I must study and recognize, be aware of and learn from. The seerah is indeed inspirational, illuminating for you and I in every dimension. Yet unfortunately, one thing that emerges when it comes to the seerah of the blessed Prophet of Islam is the very fact that A, sometimes some Muslims are negligent of it, and B, there are a number of areas which are not appropriate when it comes to the seerah of the life of the Prophet. Meaning what? Meaning that the biography of the Messenger of God should be one that Muslims are entirely happy with, and it illuminates with wisdom and positivity. Yet when you investigate the life of the Prophet as described by some Muslim literature, there is a lot left to be desired. There is indeed a much negativity that exists when you speak about the life of the Messenger of God, when you find some references, some historical texts in books that today are revered by Muslims. I tell you, when Muslims were enraged, rightfully, when the book Satanic Verses by this individual, Salman al-Rushdie, emerged, many were angered. But when you look deeper into the book, you recognize that many of the stories that this individual became aware of and fabricated were from Muslim literature itself. In other words, this doesn't justify this particular crime that he committed. However, there is a need to look at Muslim literature in itself. You ask me how? I tell you, chapter 94 of the Quran is an illustration of where we have reached when we study the biography of the Messenger of God. When you and I recite the surah, Alam nashrah laka sadrak. When you look at this surah, Suratul Inshirah, the opening of the chest, so to speak, you ask Muslims, what is the background of this story? You find in volume 1 of Sahih Muslim, there is an emphasis in a number of other literature within Muslim schools of thought. They come to you and tell you this is an incident that happened 5 times in the life of the Messenger of God. How many times? 5 times. When the Messenger of God was 3, when he was 10, when he was 40, when he went to the Isra and Mi'raj. And then they say on the 5th occasion, we don't know. 5 occasions, they say, the Prophet of Islam had an open heart surgery. Today, despite many Muslims not aware of it, over 1 billion Muslims believe this. What do they say? When the Quran says, Alam nashrah laka sadrak, have we not opened up your chest? They say, these riwayat are found in numerous books of hadith, that when the Prophet of Islam was only 3 years of age, he was playing with other children, or the other children were with him. Yes, and the Prophet then is held by Jibreel. And the other children scream because Jibreel opens up the heart of the Prophet physically. He takes out the heart of the Prophet. He places the heart in a gold basin. And he tries to wash it with Zamzam water, looking for a thread that Shaitan had placed in the heart of the Messenger of God. When he places this heart of the Holy Prophet in this particular basin, he washes it, then he places it back and he stitches the body of the Prophet, to the extent that the children run away and they say that Muhammad is being killed. Halima Sa'diyya radwanullahi ta'ala alayha, when she's told by this, she's afraid, she returns the Prophet to his mother Amina, because she says, I don't know what's happened to his chest. And this, according to over 1 billion Muslims today, happened how many times? Happened 5 times, repeatedly, to the extent that one of the companions of the Prophet, Anas ibn Malik, says, when I was serving the Prophet later on in life, I saw scars on his chest. The recognition that emerges is they say that Shaitan kept returning this threat on the heart of the Prophet. That Jibreel takes it out, Shaitan puts it back. Jibreel takes it out, Shaitan puts it back. Thank God the Prophet wasn't waiting on the NHS operation list. The recognition that emerges today when you speak to them and you say, brother, sister, how can you accept this? It's in Sahih literature. We cannot reject it because these literature, these hadith are all authentic. How can we? And so when it comes to our story, our version, we completely, of course, reject such a notion. These are Israelite traditions. They were planted in order to distort the message of the Prophet of Islam. Because why is it that the Prophet of Islam had to go through 5 open heart surgeries when other prophets did not? Why should there be a physical thread that's placed inside the heart? Since when does Shaitan place a physical thread, a thread, small piece of, for example, paper or whatever inside the heart to distort the human being? Why should Jibreel come and wash the heart? If there is such a thing, since when does the Shaitan get close to the heart of the prophets of God? And many other ways in which we reject such a story categorically. Yet unfortunately, we've come to a point where we need to speak and educate ourselves when it comes to the correct seerah of this great individual, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And I tell you, the invitation for all Muslims to re-examine some of their literature in line with the way we view the Messenger of God does not stop only here. Because sometimes you and I may look at this and think, you know what? Alhamdulillah, we have the school of Ahl al-Bayt, we have narrations that we can rely on. But sometimes you and I pick up habits, you and I do things in our lives also requires reform. In other words, the biography of the Messenger of God is not the only area that sometimes we need to re-examine. Yes, sometimes we need to re-look at many aspects in our lives. Sometimes we pick up habits throughout our lives. A few nights ago, I mentioned the subject of eating food from Hindus. A number of people came to me and said, there is a problem here. I said, what is it? That some struggle to accept this. Let me elaborate a little bit more about what I mentioned. The recognition that emerges in the religion of Islam, there is a principle. The principle is everything is tahir unless you know for sure that it is najis. Everything. Number 1. Number 2, if somebody today, for example, saw something that is najis, it is not obligatory for them to tell others that it is najis. The human being, the believer, themselves must come to a certainty either by seeing it with their eyes or being told by a reliable individual about something which is najis. The recognition that emerges today is, what we mentioned is, if you're given food from somebody who is not from Ahl al-Kitab, and the food is vegetarian to start off with, yes, if it's meat, you have to establish whether it's halal or not, and that has its own separate discussion. If it is vegetarian, let us imagine, sometimes we have to simplify, a vegetable samosa, yes? You're given this by somebody who is your neighbor, who is what? From the Hindu faith. What the Sharia of the religion of Islam tells you is, number 1, you don't need to ask their religion. Number 2, you don't need to ask how they prepared it. Number 3, if you have not seen them use their own wet hands in preparation, then you can assume tahara, because everything is pure unless you know for sure it is najis. Now some people said to me, but isn't it better to avoid this? Isn't it better just to kind of not eat? I say to them, my dear sisters and brother, you are more than welcome to practice ihtiyat and not to eat. There is a difference between that which you prefer and that which is Islamic law. You could choose whatever you wish. You could say, I don't want to eat it. But when it comes to what is right and wrong, and as far as halal and haram is concerned, we have to clarify the rulings If sometimes we have an idea in our minds, we need to, because sometimes you and I become the halal haram police. Have you heard this term? We make it our own objective in life to keep telling people halal, haram, don't do this. Do you think this existed now with Facebook and Instagram? No. This was at the time of the messengers and the imams, because we have a sahih hadith that is established in Kafi. That was what highlighted to me by one of my colleagues and scholars today. I was having a conversation with him. He said, this hadith is sahih. The chain of narration is established. What is this hadith? This is from the holy sixth Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. He says, my father, the fifth holy Imam, peace be upon him, went to do ghusl. Please listen to this hadith. He went to do ghusl in a public bath. You know, back in the time, they used to have areas where they do ghusl. Yes. The hadith says in Al-Kafi, he was doing ghusl from janaba. When he finished ghusl, he left. The moment he left, he saw one of those haram halal police people who said to him, Yabna Rasulillah, you've missed the part in your back, it's dry. You've missed it. The Imam alayhi salam looks at him and says, Ma kana alayka law sakat. If you had kept quiet, it's better. You don't need to tell me this. Yes? What is Imam alayhi salam trying to tell you and I and all of humanity? At the end of the day, this particular part, if you think it's missed, it's not your problem to highlight. Yes? And the Imam alayhi salam immediately takes some water and covers it, yes, just in case it's missed. But he's highlighting to you and I, there are people I have heard who've come one day, they say, Maulana, M&M's haram, Coca-Cola haram, this Snickers haram. Subhanallah, they have a problem with chocolates. Every day something haram. Ya akhi, you have qualification to bring these deductions. You have studied, you have become a mujtahid. Every day we receive a message. Maulana, this thing, that thing, haram. Somebody said. Once again, take a step back, understand there is a role for our ulama, isn't it? That's number one. Sometimes in our ibadah, we need to relook at some of the things. May Allah bless the mu'mineen and mu'minat when they recite ziyarah after salah. Beautiful. Very nice to recite ziyarah of the ma'soomeen after each salah. This is noble, this is recommended. But we have mentioned from the minbar again, this ziyarah is good, but it needs to be corrected. Because the ziyarah is incomplete. And the ziyarah, I don't think personally, as a humble student of Islam, pleases the Ahl al-Bayt as it should be. You say to me, what's wrong with the ziyarah? I say to you, for many, many years, I have searched and done research and want to know the answer of why is it in ziyarah we only mention the third Imam, the eighth Imam, and the 12th Imam. Why not the rest of the Imams? I don't want to from the minbar say, I give you a prize if you give me the answer. Some people have said to me, back in the time, we used to turn to the eighth Imam because it's a different direction to the other Imams. I say, very well, turn, mention the eighth Imam, but mention the other Imams as well. Someone said to me recently, you know why we mention only the eighth Imam? I said, why? He said, because he's ghareeb al-ghuraba. He's by himself. Wallah, today, the 10th Imam and the 11th Imam are more strangers than the 8th Imam. Today, the 4 Imams of Baqi are ghuraba. This is not to take anything away from the excellence of the 8th Holy Imam. Peace and blessings be upon him. But today, when we come to ziyarah, we should mention all the Imams, yes? We should highlight all the Imams. Why? Someone says to me, this is how we've done it all along. Please, why are you changing what we've done? I say, my dear brother, my dear sister, I accept that you've done this all along. But tell me the wisdom. Today, our youngsters, they're being taught this ziyarah. We need to teach them the names of all the Imams, alayhum as-salam. Yes? Let us mention the Holy Prophet, Amir al-Mu'mineen, the 5, then go on, the 4th, 5th, 6th Imam. Mention them all. It will take literally 1 more minute. Is it time restrictions or is it habit? I think it's habit. Sometimes we have to wait and stop and say, okay, is this correct? What are ulama saying? One person said to me, brother, you've mentioned this few times from the minbar. Wallah, we have better things to talk about. I say, no problem. You have better things to talk about. But we want to please Ali Muhammad. Yes? We want to keep their legacy. These are small things, but they can actually what? Eventually become something that what? Will change to the positive habit, that all the community will begin to recite ziyarah in a manner That is what? That is pleasing to the Ahl al-Bayt. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. That's why when you look at the migration of the Holy Prophet, there are a number of fantastic points that perhaps have been missed. Some of the excellent areas which we need to look at very briefly through a number of questions. Number one, what were the circumstances that led the Prophet of Islam to leave Mecca? Number two, what did he say to Amir al-Mu'mineen? And how did Amir al-Mu'mineen deal with the situation surrounding him sleeping on the bed of the Holy Prophet? And how is it depicted, number three, in the Holy Quran? And how does people like Ibn Taymiyyah want to take away the fadila of the commander of the faithful? Number five, very importantly, was it the first Khalifa Abu Bakr with the Prophet in the cave, or was it someone else? Very important. And number six, does the Holy Quran in chapter 9 praise the person who was with the Prophet in any shape or form? And is this an ayah that can be used to speak about the fadila of one of the companions of the Holy Prophet? And number seven, how is the hijrah of the Prophet of Islam something that inspired Sayyid al-Shuhada Abu Abdullah Al-Hussain salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi? This discussion is historical, but it requires your attention because I will answer it through a number of questions. I will not go through it basing the notion that most of us know the basics when it comes to the hijrah of the Holy Prophet, but more so dig deep into some areas perhaps we have not thought about before. Number one, we recognize that the Prophet of Islam in Mecca was facing a campaign of intimidation, harassment, torture of his companions for 13 years. Some of them went to Habasha, others were imprisoned, some were killed, and that's why he met on 2 consecutive years for Hajj the Muslims who came from Yathrib, and they would give him the allegiance and say, Ya Rasulullah, join us. The decision that was made to leave Mecca and to go to Medina was made because Quraysh gathered in a place known as Darun Nadwa, where they usually gather, and they would discuss, what are we supposed to do? We tried everything. But now, narrations tell us, within their gathering was an elderly man whom somehow they respected because he was speaking eloquently to them and he was giving them ideas they'd never heard before. The elderly man was who? Iblis. Iblis came in the form of a human being. He sat with them and he said to them, look, you've tried everything. Now it's time to finally finish off Muhammad. You have to kill him. You now are in a stronger position. They said, why? He said to them, Abu Talib is gone. There is no protector. Now it's your opportunity. They said, how are we supposed to kill him when still Bani Hashim would blame us? He said, the best thing to do is to pick amongst you people, youth from every tribe, from every group, and share his blood money. You would all take part in the assassination, and you would share responsibility, and you will be okay. They said, is there any other reason? He said to them, yes. He said, what? He said, Muhammad is about to leave. He met a group of people from Yathrib. They offered him refuge. They offered him a place to come. So your chance is very limited. You have to finish him off. Yes, they agreed. This was when? During Muharram and Safar, 13 years after what? After the Bi'tha of the Holy Prophet, when the Prophet of Islam was 53 years of age. We are told that the likes of Umayyah, Abu Lahab, Abu Jahl, and Khalid bin Walid were tasked with the responsibility to go and assassinate the Messenger of God. When did this happen? Let's know finer details. It is said that the attack took place on the eve of Thursday, Wednesday night, Laylatul Khamis, and it happened on the 1st of Rabi' al-Awwal. According to many riwayat, Sunni and Shia, they said first Rabi' al-Awwal. Where was the Messenger of God? He was in the house of Khadija, salamullahi alayha. Yes, he was there. Now, what happened is that somebody asked the question, was there anyone else in the house? Was it only Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Prophet of Islam? Where was Sayyidatun Nisa, peace be upon her? We searched and searched, ulama researched, they could not find any indication as to the location of where Sayyidah was. But it's likely that the Messenger of God has told her to go in the house of Abu Talib to stay with Fatima bint Asad, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayha, because later they would join with Amir al-Mu'mineen and take the path towards Medina. Now, what did the Prophet of Islam tell Amir al-Mu'mineen? In accordance with Sunni traditions, what did he actually say to whom? To the Prophet, to Amir al-Mu'mineen. He said to him, Ya Ali, inna ar-ruh al-amin habata alay. That Jibreel descended upon me. يخبرني أن قريشا اجتمعت على المكر وقتلي. They are going to kill me. They want to finish me. وأنه أوصى إلي عن ربي عز وجل أن أهجر دار قومي. I have to leave. Allah has told me I have to leave my house and I have to go to Ghar Thawr. Now, very interestingly, the Prophet of Islam went to this mountain known as Ghar Thawr. Please remember these names, yes? Ghar Thawr is where? Ghar Thawr is in the south of Mecca. Medina direction is where? North of Mecca. If you want to go towards Medina, you leave from northern Mecca. Ghar Thawr is in the southern region of Mecca, yes? So the Prophet of Islam says that he told me to go to this Ghar Thawr at night. And what? He has told me to ask you to sleep in my bed. فَمَا أَنْتَ قَائِلٌ وَصَانِعٌ. What is your opinion? فَقَالَ عَلِي أَوَ تَسْلَمَنَّ بِمَبِيتِ هُنَاكَ يَا نَبِيَ اللَّهِ. Will you be safe the moment I sleep on your bed there, Ya Rasulullah? The Prophet said, Na'am. Look at the narration. This is found in a number of books. Mustadrak of Hakim, Ahmad ibn Hanbal's Musnad. Yes, he says, فَتَبَسَّمَ عَلِيًّا ضَاحِكًا. Ali smiled and he was seen joyful. وَأَهْوَى إِلَى الْأَرْضِ سَاجِدًا. Then he immediately went onto the earth performing sajda. Riwayat tell us he was the first human being to do sajda of shukr to Allah after Rasulullah. The first one to do sajda of what? Shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَمَّا رَفَعَ رَأْسَهُ قَالَ. When he raised his hand, he said to the Holy Prophet, إِمْضِ لِمَا أَمَرْتَ. Go, you have been commanded. فِدَاكَ سَمْعِي وَبَصَرِي وَسُوَيْدَاءِ قَلْبِي. I will sacrifice for you my ears, my eyes, my heart, and all my body. وَمِرْنِي بِمَا شِئْتَ أَكُنْ فِيهِ طَائِعًا. You command me whatever you wish and I will be obedient. Yes? Then the narration says, ثُمَّ ضَمَّهُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَى صَدْرِهِ. The Holy Prophet hugged him, embraced him, وَبَكَى إِلَيْهِ. And he cried. And Amir al-Mu'mineen cried, وَبَكَى عَلِي جَشَعًا لِفِرَاقِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. That he is about to what? Say his goodbyes to the Messenger of God. Yes. Now, the Quran tells us that where in chapter 8 verse number 30, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Holy Messenger, وَإِذْ يَمْكُرُ بِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِيُثْبِتُوكَ أَوْ يَقْتُلُوكَ. That those disbelievers are now going to what? Capture you or to kill you. وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. Yes, they plot and Allah plans and Allah is the best of planners. The Holy Prophet of Islam was there at night in the house. They surrounded. How many? 15. 15 of them came and they surrounded the house, including Khalid ibn Walid, Umayyah, Abu Jahl. They surrounded the house. The Prophet of Islam was still in the house. He leaves. The moment he leaves, he recites, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ سَدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سَدًّا فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. The verse that we recite in Surah Yasin, yes, that they will not see. And then he had some soil, he threw it. They will not see who left. They were blinded by the fact that he left. He left by himself, the Quran says. There was no one with him. Somebody asked this question. If this was a miracle, the Prophet left miraculously, isn't it? Because he recited this, they could not see that he left the house. Why did he then ask Amir al-Mu'mineen to sleep in his bed? Why couldn't he do another miracle? Valid question. Why did he leave with a miracle, but in order for what? For the story to continue, he asked Amir al-Mu'mineen to sleep on his bed. The answer is number one, what? The answer is that the Prophet of Islam wanted to show people the status of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yes? He wanted to show them the sacrifice of Ali, the valor of Ali. Yes? The selflessness of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Yes, that is no doubt. Because the narrations tell us that night before he left, he took Amir al-Mu'mineen. This is where found in Mustadrak of Al-Hakim al-Nayshaburi, Sunni. He says Amir al-Mu'mineen was taken by the Prophet towards the Kaaba. that night before they came. And they entered inside the Kaaba. And the Holy Prophet said to Ali, Ali, go on my shoulders. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, when I placed my feet on the shoulders of the Prophet and I looked up, كَأَنِّي أَنَالُ السَّمَاءِ, I saw the heavens open up. He says, that moment the Prophet of Islam said to me, the biggest idol, break it. And so Amir al-Mu'mineen pushed the idol and it fell on the ground and it shattered. By the way, this was later repeated when in the conquest of Mecca. When what? All the idols were broken. Why did the Prophet do this before he left? To humiliate Quraysh. Why did he take Ali? He was to say that Tawheed and the oneness of Allah will only be established through me and Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yes? In the recognition that there is a plan for this, the Prophet of Islam leaves. Amir al-Mu'mineen is where? Amir al-Mu'mineen is sleeping on the bed of the Holy Messenger. The narration tells us that they began to pelt him with stones and small sticks. Why? They wanted to see if somebody is sleeping on the bed. They wanted to see if somebody's there. Amir al-Mu'mineen, it's dark, it's night. Yes? Abu Jahl said to them, I don't want the attack before Fajr because I don't want to kill anyone innocent. I just want to kill Muhammad. That's it, right? I don't want to be responsible for blood money of anyone. So they began to pelt him. The narrations tell us Amir al-Mu'mineen would move his body right and left in order to show that there is someone there every time he's being pelted. Yes? And so when it came for the time of Fajr, they attacked. When they attacked, they charged towards Amir al-Mu'mineen. They came close by. Yes? Khalid ibn Walid was the individual who attacked first. The riwayah is very detailed. The riwayah says, the moment he had the sword and he wanted to strike whoever was sleeping on the bed, his hand was held firmly to the impact that he screamed in agony. Yes? And then twisted. When he's twisted, the sword fell. The sword fell and Amir al-Mu'mineen picked up the sword. It was dark. It was just about what? You can just about see who was there. Yes? Amir al-Mu'mineen picks up the sword. He looks at them. They struggle to see who it is. They said, Man hadha? Who are you? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Ana Ali. They said, we don't want you. We're not looking for you. Ayna Muhammad? Where is Muhammad? He said, why are you asking me? What am I got to do with it? Yes. Now, interestingly, neither did Amir al-Mu'mineen kill them, nor did they do anything to Amir al-Mu'mineen. It's a valid question. Why didn't they do something? Number one, they were afraid. Yes. That they thought, you know what, this man can finish us off. No doubt, yes. Number two, they were more distracted with the idea that was the Prophet of Islam. They were disgraced. Why did Amir al-Mu'mineen kill them? Khalid ibn Walid and others, yes. And the answer to this is Amir al-Mu'mineen did not wish to create a problem for Quraysh to use against him and the Prophet. Yes? Because so far, it is them who have attacked. So far, it's them who are responsible. So, if Amir al-Mu'mineen was to kill one of them, they would use this later. Yes? Now, a number of riwayat from Sunni and Shia come forward, including Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Mustadrak and others, and say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayah in the Holy Quran in chapter 2 verse 207 in the merit of the sacrifice of the commander of the faithful Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ. From amongst the people there are those who sell their souls for the sake of the pleasure of Allah. وَاللَّهُ رَؤُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. And Allah is pleased or He's kind towards His servants. What happens here is the riwayat from Sunni literature as well as Shia say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to the angels, Jibreel and Mikael, and some say Israfil or other angels, and said to them, who would amongst you would sacrifice themselves for the other? Who is willing to what? Give their life for the other? None of them said. Eventually the Almighty would say to them, if you are not, then descend on the earth and look at my servant Ali. He is willing to sacrifice his life for my servant Rasul. Yes? And so they descend. A narration says when Amir al-Mu'mineen was in his bed, Jibreel was what? Jibreel is at his head. Then the angels were at his feet and they were speaking to him and said to him, Bakhin, bakhin laka ya Ali. Congratulations to you, O Ali. Man mithluk wa bika yubahi Allahu mala'ikat as-sama. Who is like you? And Allah is showing you off to the angels of the heavens. Yes. This is used by our ulama to highlight that the status of the commander of the faithful is greater than the malaika. Understand this, yes? Amongst a number of other evidence that we have, this shows that what? That the status of the commander of the faithful is what? Is greater. Now, this ayah is very important because why? Because there are a number of pointers for this ayah we have to understand in order to appreciate the excellence and the merit of the commander of the faithful. Some people ask the question, why does it say وَمِنَ النَّاسِ? Why didn't it say Ali? Why didn't it say that individual? From amongst the people, it says. Number one, ayahs to do with the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen are subject to examination and test for believers. It is not given on a plate. It is not given something as straightforward. You know, people you have there on YouTube and other places, they come out and say, why isn't there a clear verse on imamah? Why isn't there this and that? The answer is simple. There are many verses. Open your heart and study and you'll see. But it's an examination for the believers, yes. When it comes to this, there is number one. The number two is when that verse says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ, it's in reference to the Ahl al-Bayt, Amir al-Mu'mineen, as well as his sons. The 11 Imams, yes? Because they would sacrifice themselves too, isn't it? Right? And if you go back in this chapter, a few verses before, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about a group of people, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُعْجِبُكَ قَوْلُهُ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَيُشْهِدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا فِي قَلْبِهِ وَهُوَ أَلَدُّ الْخِصَامِ. That Allah rebukes some people and says there are those who are what? Who are speaking hypocrisy. There are those who are the staunchest of my enemies. In chapter 2, verse 204, now he talks about what? There are amongst those who will sacrifice themselves for the sake of Allah. But we have in history those who have come forward and said that this ayah is not in the fadila of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Yes. Amongst them is what? Is Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah said this is a fallacy. This story is nonsense. He says this ayah cannot be considered a praise and a fadila of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Please understand this so that you know how to reply. Do you know what he says? He says, first of all, you say that this ayah is in Surah Al-Baqarah, don't you? We say yes. He says, Surah Al-Baqarah, is it Mekki or Madani? Madani. How is it possible? Because this ayah was revealed in Mecca. Number one. Number two, he says, don't you refer to hadith in Sunni and Shia literature in which the Prophet of Islam said to him, Ya Ali, there will be no harm that will reach you. So if the Prophet said to him, Ya Ali, there will be no harm that will reach you, what is the fadila, what is the merit that Ali had in sleeping on the bed of the Prophet? He writes, sometimes when these are presented before us, we need to have the recognition. Number one, any person studying ulum al-Quran will recognize there are chapters of the Quran that are either Meccan or Madanite. But there are verses within it that could be from Mecca or Medina. You say to me, give me an example. This same surah, ayah, that talks about the Prophet of Islam going to be attacked and he has to leave in Surah Al-Anfal. Yes, verse number 30. Surah Al-Anfal is Madani. This ayah was revealed in Mecca, telling the Prophet of Islam, leave. Yes, that's number one. Number two, did the Prophet say to Ali ibn Abi Talib, you will be protected and that no harm will come to you? Yes, he did. When did he say it? Later. Because Amir al-Mu'mineen went to the cave. When he went to the cave, he would give the Holy Prophet and whoever was with him food. And Amir al-Mu'mineen was then told by the Prophet, I want you to go and what? Tell people if there's anything that's outstanding from loans or whatever, and you fulfill it on my behalf. And don't worry, there will be no harm that will fall on you. So the Prophet said it when? After Amir al-Mu'mineen had slept on the bed. Look at how there's twisting of what? Twisting of the truth in historical analysis. Someone else says, what about the ayah? The ayah says, "Man yashri nafsahu ibtigha'a mardatillah." Please understand this. This is delicate. Yes, because the word here is yashri. Why is the word yashri being used in the Quran here in reference to the sacrifice of the commander of the faithful? It's because when you look at the word yashri in the Quran in two other places, it refers to what? It refers to somebody who gives something that is not worthwhile for something cheap. Yes. In the recognition that, for example, in Surah Yusuf, وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ, the Quran says that they bought Yusuf with a small, insignificant amount because they did not think much of Yusuf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here saying Ali ibn Abi Talib was selling his soul because he believed genuinely that his soul was not worth even the whole sacrifice that he was doing for Rasulullah. That he was so humble in that way that he would consider his soul to be cheap. Towards what? Towards giving this for the sake of Allah. But notice, the final part of the ayah says, what? He did it for Jannah? No. He did it to stay away from Jahannam? No. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ, for the sake of seeking the pleasure of Allah. Because Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Ilahi, ma abadtuka khawfan min narik. Ya Allah, I do not worship you because of my fear of your hell. وَلَا طَمَعًا فِي جَنَّتِكَ, not because I am seeking your Jannah. وَلَكِنَّنِي رَأَيْتُكَ أَهْلًا لِلْعِبَادَةِ فَعَبَدْتُكَ. It's because I see you worthy of worship and therefore I worship you. The question therefore is that this hijrah of the Holy Prophet illustrates and demonstrates the excellence of the commander of the faithful. Yes, his willingness to be altruistic, to protect the religion of Islam, to protect the Prophet of Islam. Now some people come and say, yes, very well, we accept this because it's agreed between Sunni and Shia. He slept on the bed. There is a verse that is what? Praising him. But there is also a verse that praises the first Khalifa. Please understand the final part of this discussion. It's a delicate discussion. It's an academic discussion. It's not an emotional one. Yes. Therefore, please bear with me in order to ask the very important question. Who was with the Prophet when he left his house and then went to the cave in Jabal Thawr? Who? Today you ask the majority of Muslims, including the followers of school of Ahlul Bayt, and they tell you is the first Khalifa Abu Bakr. True? There is a very interesting, very plausible theory with evidence that suggests it was not the first Khalifa Abu Bakr. You say to me, what are the evidence? Yes, number one, Sahih Bukhari, volume 1, hadith 170, as well as volume 8, hadith 115. It says, أبا بكر صلى خلف سالم مولى أبي حذيفة ولم يكن رسول الله هاجر. That Abu Bakr was in Medina and he prayed behind a man by the name of Salim Mawla Abi Hudhayfa. This Salim Mawla Abi Hudhayfa was in Medina, yes, and Abu Bakr prayed behind him. In two occasions in Sahih Bukhari says that Abu Bakr was in Medina. Number one. Number two, the Quran comes forward where in Surah Tawbah, verse number 40, and tells us the story of the Prophet being in the cave. Please understand this. I know it's slightly technical, but you will see a different dimension to the story of the migration from appreciating this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا تَنْصُرُوهُ فَقَدْ نَصَرَهُ اللَّهُ. If you don't give him victory, Allah has given him victory. إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. He by himself left. Ulama here some come and say, if he was with someone else at the beginning, surely the Quran would have said, إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُمَا. Two people. The ayah says, أَخْرَجَهُ. One person left. Only the Prophet of Islam left. Yes? Because narrations tell us when the Prophet of Islam left, he saw a man by the name of Abdullah ibn Urayqit ibn Bakr. Please understand this name. Very important name. This is whom he was known to know the ways. He was very smart in the desert. So he said to the Prophet of Islam, I will take you a route, follow me. Yes, Abdullah ibn Urayqat ibn Abu Bakr. However, the other narrations come forward and say that the Prophet of Islam left and somehow on the way he bumped into the first Khalifa. Or somehow the first Khalifa joined him. Or that he went to the house of the first Khalifa. These narrations exist amongst the school of Khilafah, our brothers. Yes? But the Quran diffuses this. The Quran says the Prophet left by himself. Now, then the other evidence that exists out there is that what? That in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Abu Bakr himself, the first Khalifa, after the story of the declaration of what? Of the amnesty to the people of Mecca for 4 months in Surah Tawbah, where the Prophet of Islam initially had sent Abu Bakr to declare this message, and then he recalled him by sending Amir al-Mu'mineen, because Jibreel descended of the Prophet and said, Allah commands you to either declare this yourself or rajulin min nafsik, someone from within you. And so he sends Amir al-Mu'mineen. Abu Bakr was halfway through, he is sent back. According to Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal in his Musnad, Abu Bakr came to the Holy Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, is there a verse in my merit? Is there a verse that mentions me? The Prophet said, no. There's nothing. If that particular ayah was in the merit of the first Khalifa and he was with the Prophet in the cave, surely this would have been something that he would constantly speak about, or that the Muslims would know, or that the Prophet would say, yes, there is that verse, chapter 9, verse number 40. That is about you. That's number 3. Number 4, Bukhari, volume 6, hadith 42. Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, says that there was not a single ayah revealed in our merit in the Quran. Not a single ayah. Now you come to me and say, okay, these are 4 strong evidence, yes, from books that are considered sahih. Yes. What happened then? How did it all work out then? This man, Abdullah ibn Urayqat ibn Bakr, was known short as Ibn Bakr. The Prophet went with Ibn Bakr. Now you know what happened. Throughout history, Ibn Bakr became Abu Bakr. Yes? That is why today you speak to our brothers and they say, you know this ayah? It speaks about his excellence. It speaks about the fact that he was the companion of the Prophet and Allah praised him. We say, okay, very well. Let's assume it was him. Let's assume. Yes? Let's assume it was the first Khalifa with the Prophet. How do we answer this finally? Because it's a very important question. Some people come forward and say, does this ayah in any shape or form illustrate the merit of the first Khalifa? We say to them, how does it illustrate? They say the ayah says, إِلَّا تَنْصُرُوهُ فَقَدْ نَصَرَهُ اللَّهُ. Number 1, if you do not give him victory, Allah gave him victory. He gave how many people victory? 1 or 2 people. He gave only 1 person victory. You have to make a decision. Was it the Prophet that he gave victory or the person who was with him? They say, okay, very well. It says, ثاني اثنين. The ayah continues, it says, إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا ثاني اثنين. He is the second of the 2. So they say, clearly there was 2 people, yes? Is ثاني اثنين a matter of merit? We say no, because it is just numerical. There are 2 people. Use the second of the 2 people, yes? Then they say, if you say this, because the next part of the ayah definitely shows he has a great merit in Islam, in the Quran. We say what? The ayah says, إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ. He, the Prophet, said to his companion. You say, look, the Quran describes the first Khalifa as Sahabi of Rasulullah. This is a great merit. We say to him, hold on a second. Have you read the Quran and the way it talks about Sahabi, or the word that is used, Sahabi, what does it refer to? They say, what do you mean? I say, come to the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says with Surah Yusuf, yes, Ya Sahibay Sijn. These 2 who were with Prophet Yusuf in the dungeons, Yusuf said to them, you are my companions. Were they good people? Not necessarily. Furthermore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 18, قَالَ لَهُ صَاحِبُهُ وَهُوَ يُحَاوِرُهُ أَكَفَرْتَ بِالَّذِي. So there's the story of the two who have this conversation. Yes, one of them has a garden that he boasts about. The other said to him, don't boast about this. The Quran says the individual who said to him, don't boast, said to his sahib, his companion. In Arabic, sahib means somebody who is with you physically. Doesn't mean anything special. Now, they say, okay, very well. If it doesn't mean anything special in the Quran, the ayah says what? لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Don't be afraid. Allah is surely with us. Don't grieve. Is this a matter of praise? No, on the contrary. Because if you look at narrations, it says that the Prophet of Islam had to, whoever was with him, calm him because he was about to disclose. When the disbelievers came, when Quraysh finally found the cave, he was about to say, we are here. And the Prophet said to him, don't grieve, don't shout, don't raise your voice. Allah is with us. He will save us. Yes. Now, they say very well. The next part definitely means he has a fadila. Because every time we respond, there is a فَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ سَكِينَتَهُ عَلَيْهِ. Allah sends sakina, tranquility on him. When I was looking at the tafsir of our brothers, they say this is sakina on whom? On the first Khalifa. Because the Prophet doesn't receive sakina, they said. Because this is praise. فَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ سَكِينَتَهُ عَلَيْهِ. How do we respond? Well, once again, you look at the Holy Quran. In chapter 9, verse 26, Allah says, ثُمَّ أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ سَكِينَتَهُ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ وَعَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah sends His sakina, tranquility, on His messenger as well as the believers. فَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ سَكِينَتَهُ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ وَعَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ is also in chapter 48, verse number 26. So the question here we have is, it's either the Prophet who received the sakina or the person who is with him. Which one is it? If it is the person who is with him, that means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send the support upon the Prophet, just left him to be. Whereas the Quran says, in 2 occasions, He sends His tranquility upon the Prophet. Why not in this particular instance? Yes? And the Quran then says, وَأَيَّدَهُ بِجُنُودٍ لَمْ تَرَوْهَا. The verse continues and says, Allah supported him with armies that you did not see. Supported who? If you say this was the Prophet, then the sakina has to be to the Prophet. Because in the Arabic, dhamir here, yes, I know it's badly technical, goes back to what? To what was being described. So if you say the first Khalifa, or whoever was with him, Allah is supporting him with armies that you did not see. What about the Prophet? He's not supported with the armies. Which is the armies that you did not see? Angels. The fact that the spider made this web, for example. The pigeon and the bird that had a nest at the entrance of the cave. Yes? So therefore, the ayah in no shape or form gives any merit to anybody other than the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. That's why you recognize one of the most important lessons that you and I learned from this particular incident, important part of Islamic history, is the fact that in Muharram and many times in our lives, we are encouraged to give for the sake of Allah. We are encouraged to sacrifice, to give up that which is close to our hearts. We are encouraged to compromise. We are encouraged to feel the pain of giving up that which we desire, isn't it? And this is an important part of our teachings. Many times in our lives, we are given an opportunity to do this. But sometimes we choose that which is comfortable, that which is pleasing to us, rather than that which gives for the sake of Allah. And you and I can perhaps relate to this into our own lives, isn't it? That's why Sayyid al-Shuhada, when it came to his migration, his movement from Medina to Mecca, from Mecca towards Karbala, without a shadow of a doubt, he recognized that number one, sometimes we need to give up that which we desire. which, for example, in this case is Medina. Medina was beloved to Imam Hussain alayhi salam, to the Ahl al-Bayt alayhum salam. Similarly, afterwards, Mecca. He did not want his blood to be shed in Mecca. And he would migrate. Sometimes migration means abandoning that which I desire, my hometown, yes, in order to find somewhere in which I can protect my faith, I can protect my religion. Yes? Similarly, he gave everything that he had, as well as those around him. An example for humanity to learn when it comes to sacrifice and indeed dedication. Yes. As we come to the end of this first period of Aza, and the Aza continues without a shadow of a doubt in Muharram and Safar and throughout the year. Yes. Remembrance of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein does not stop. But here's a question finally that we have to ask ourselves this Muharram. Yes. What is it that I'm going to give to Allah in the name of Abu Abdullah? Because if you tell me every Muharram I come, I cry, I beat the chest, I mourn, and then I resume my life normally. Very well, you attain the thawab of majalis, but you and I must give. You and I must sacrifice. You and I must feel the pain of what? Of that tadhiyah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is why I tell you, these Ahl al-Bayt and those who were taken captive, did you think that the sacrifice finished on the 10th of Muharram? No doubt it continued. No doubt they persevered. No doubt they knew that they have to give more and more. Amongst them, of course, is Imam Zayn al-Abidin. The riwayah tells us that Abu Hamza al-Thimali would see Imam crying and weeping. He said to him, Ya ibn Rasulillah, why do I see you in this state? Why are you continuously crying? He said to him, Abu Hamza, why do you ask this question? Abu Hamza said, أليس القتل لكم عادة وكرامتكم من الله الشهادة? Isn't death something that is normal for you, O Ahl al-Bayt? And the honor that Allah gives you is shahada? Imam Zayn al-Abidin said, yes, of course it is. But Abu Hamza, there is death and shahada, and there is beheading. I saw those that are my beloved, their heads placed on spears. I saw family members, their bodies mutilated. I saw bodies being crushed under the hooves of the horses. Does that not warrant crying and shedding the tears? Because Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam had to do one important thing, isn't it? Those members of the Ahl al-Bayt who on a day like this in the morning had to leave Karbala were begging and saying, please allow us to see for the final time the bodies of our fallen heroes, the shuhada of Karbala. Allow us to bid our farewells to them. Some of them would cling on to the bodies of their loved ones. I tell you, these bodies were without heads. Their heads were placed on spears, but the people, the Ahl al-Bayt, the companions, those who were with the Ahl al-Bayt, the children, they would still want to remain in Karbala. They didn't want to leave. Some of them were whipped. Some of them were poked. Some of them were ushered to leave this land. But it was Imam Zayn al-Abidin who returned according to riwayat on the 13th of Muharram. He left miraculously from Kufa and he had to come to Karbala because the bodies had remained without burial for 3 days. Under the heat of the sun, under the rays of the sun. Listen to the riwayah. The narration says, Imam Zayn al-Abidin came to Karbala and his face was covered. He came and saw Bani Asad. Bani Asad were there. He looked at them, they looked at him. They did not recognize him. And so they asked him, who are you? He said, can I ask you, what are you doing here? They said, we are just looking at these bodies. They were afraid this is a man from Bani Umayyah. That moment, one of them from Bani Asad, he cried out. He said, tell the truth. Speak the truth why you are here. They looked at him and said, why are you saying this? How can you be sure? He said, Wallah, I looked at the eyes of this man and the eyes were filled with tears. He is crying. Imam Zayn al-Abidin reveals his face. They say, Ya ibn Rasulillah, Ya Sayyid al-Sajideen, what happened here on the plains of Karbala? He says to them, let us start digging graves. Let us bury shuhada. The riwayah says that they buried the shuhada except two who were remaining. The first whom he said, I wish to bury, is Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein. The riwayah tells us that Imam Zayn al-Abidin looked at Bani Asad and said to them, I don't want anything from you. All I want is a piece of cloth, a hasira. Normally somebody asks for a kafan, but there is no kafan for Abu Abdullah, isn't it? Because the riwayah tells us, when Khadijah al-Kubra left this world, yes, the Prophet of Islam was given a kafan of 5 parts. Later, Amir al-Mu'mineen describes this, yes. He says to his family members when he was about to leave this world, he said, when the Prophet of Islam was given this kafan, it was divided to 5 parts. The first part was for Khadija. The second part was for the Holy Prophet. The third was for my beloved wife, Fatima. Oh my dear children, the 4th part of this kafan is from me. Make sure you cover me with it. The 5th part is for my son Hassan. Do you know who was sitting in the room and then stood up and said, Father, what about my brother Hussein? Is there no kafan for Abu Abdullah? Ya Mazloom, Ya Hussein. The riwayah tells us, they said to him, Ya Sayyid al-Sajideen, this piece of cloth, why do you want it? He said, because there is no body on the plains of Karbala like the body of my father Hussein. It's been stabbed in every corner. It's like a hedgehog. The body is covered with arrows. Every time I pick up a piece of the body, a piece of it falls. I need a small cloth to gather the body parts of my father Hussein. Ya Aba Abdullah. They said to him, Ya Zayn al-Abidin, we wish to help you. He said, no, because there are those who help me. Salama said, that night, what did I see? In my dream, I saw my beloved Rasulullah. He had soil on his face. He had soil on his body and his clothes. I said to him, Ya Rasulullah, why are you in this state? He said to me, Salama, we are burying my Hussein. He began to lower the body inside the grave. When he places the body inside the grave, mu'mineen, oh lovers of Abu Abdullah, yes, ajarakallah, ya sahib al-asr wal-zaman. When you bury a loved one, this is the final wida. Often, when you bury somebody that you know, you what? You turn the face towards the qibla. You embrace them. You kiss the face for the final time. Imam Zayn al-Abidin looks at the body. There is no face to turn. There is no head to look at. There is no neck to kiss. The poet says, Ya Sajjad, how did you lower the body when the chest was broken? The riwayah tells us that Imam Zayn al-Abidin left the grave open. He went back to the battlefield. He began to walk on the sand dunes of Karbala. They said to him, Ya Imam, what are you doing? He came back. He had something in his hands. He entered the grave. He placed whatever he had on his hands. Later he said to them, I went to look for the fingers of Abu Abd. Then he left once again. This time he went to the battlefield. He came back with something under his abba. Yes, when he entered inside the grave, he placed whatever he had under the abba on the body of Aba Abdullah. He later told them, I heard the voice from the grave. Oh, my son, bring me my baby, my baby. Place my asghar on my chest. Imam Zain al-Abidin closes the grave. Then he places a rock on the grave. Then he engraves something on it. He says, هذا قبر الحسين الذي قتل مظلوما عطشانا. This is the grave of Hussein, who was slaughtered, thirsty and oppressed. Now it was time to go to the Alqami. Yes, to bury the body of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. On his way, he picks up the right arm of Abu al-Fadl and the left arm of Abu al-Fadl. He kisses the arms of Abu al-Fadl. He reaches close to the Alqami. He finds the body of Abu al-Fadl. The poet says, it's as if Imam Zain al-Abidin looks at the body and says, oh, my uncle Abbas, Zainab is asking, where are you? Your Sakina is asking, please come back without the water. Oh Abbas, come and see what they did to the daughters of Rasulullah. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين وإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله إلهي بالحسين الشهيد وأمه وأبيه وجده وأخيه والتسعة المعصومين من بنيه يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا رب العالمين. Accept our aza and mourning and crying for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Ya Allah, allow us to hold majalis for Sayyid al-Shuhada. Allow us to honor Sayyid al-Shuhada. Allow us to visit the shrine of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Allow us to die in the state of love of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Allow us to be resurrected with Sayyid al-Shuhada. Ya Allah, there are mu'mineen and mu'minat who are suffering in many places, here in Leicester, in other places. Some people we know, some people have requested that we remember them in dua. Ya Allah, بحق زين العابدين, grant them shifa. Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Ya Allah, accept our deeds. Allow this Muharram to be a Muharram of change. Allow us to sacrifice whatever we can for your sake, Ya Rabb al-Alameen. Ya Rabb al-Alameen, we ask you and beseech you to hasten the reappearance of our 12th Imam and to make us of his devout and sincere followers. Please recite Surah Al-Mubarakatul Fatiha for the souls of all your marhumeen. Al-Fatiha.